recently I've been specializing in psychiatric nursing, and I have seen some of your stuff, like in the past. I think Diana seems to run some sort of a business that does like hiking and, psych support kind of things, kind of combined. I don't know if that's a good way to describe it, but
yeah, it would be kind of a recreation therapy alternative to therapy.
Cool. So that's cool. I'm interested.
Awesome. Well, we're glad you're here. Yes.
Thanks.
Jessica, what about you?
I'm trying to get. Hello?
Hi.
Okay, I was trying to see if it was working. Well, what brought me here, well, I'm a teacher, and I'm just interested in the recreation aspect of it.
Okay. Awesome. Eric, what did you want to get out of today?
Well, I'm interested in all things psychology, and but this topic particularly is, I think it's the crux of the fundamental thing for, helping people cope. And so that's really it.
Great.
And I would like to learn how to apply what you're going to be showing or presenting to us, and how I can incorporate it in the classroom.
On both of those topics.
Awesome. Cool. Well, let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and mute you guys. There you are. I am going to mute you guys, and then if you have any questions, just put them up in the chat and we can answer those as we go or at the end. Okay?
Okay.
Cool. How do I get us as the main? There we go. Okay. All right. I will start. I'm Diana, and I am a nationally certified recreation therapist. I own Your Adventure RX, and yes, Eric, you're right. I do alternative therapies in conjunction or to blend with mental health therapy and maybe some other therapy that you might be going through. My background is adaptive sports, so I'm really good at adapting to most situations and getting people out there and recreating and living their best life. So, Rebecka.
I'm Rebecka. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor and depth psychologist, and I have a private practice here in Bozeman, Montana. It's called Yellowstone Wellness. And I've known Diana for probably about 6 years now, and we have had the opportunity to work together through various recreation therapy programming, and have been super excited to help her get her own brand going in the same vein. And so my hope for being here today is to have just a little conversation. I would say this is probably like Cliff Note version, pretty big overview, with a couple of specifics thrown in regards to, what is emotional resilience, what is emotional intelligence, how are those two connected, and then of course, how can recreation therapy and working through things in the wilderness be really advantageous to sort of building those coping skills and increasing our distress tolerance to negative emotions. And so I think Di's going to start.
Yes. So the reason we brought you guys here is we want to help you get back onto the path of being lost in the wilderness of your mind. And we want to help alleviate the triggers that can cause anxiety and or panic attacks, racing thoughts, and we also want to prevent mental breakdowns before they happen. Our goal is to give you the tools to gain control over your responses to stressful situations that may overwhelm you and kind of take over your response to what happens to that. Because life has a funny way of making a lot of amazing people feel like they're not good enough, smart enough, pretty enough, whatever. So we just want to make sure that you have the tools to move through these moments to live your best life. And then we want to talk about what emotional intelligence is. And so defined from Wikipedia is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotion, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. So what that really means is when life puts the smack down on you, it's inherently your attitude, your attitude on how you deal with that. Do you become enraged and have a lot of anger, or do you just break down and become a puddle of nonsense? So we want to make sure that you can hold it together when life puts the smack down on you. So having emotional intelligence is the ability to power through that storm and keep the sail steady. And it's an innate ability to adapt to stressful and forever changing situations with competence and grace. If you think about it in terms of having a muscle, if you flex it enough times, it's going to take less effort to lift something than it did for the first time. Just like when you go out and exercise, it's always hard that first time, but once you start getting going, we were just talking about that this morning, it gets easier as you go. So you have any questions on that?
Yes, and just to kind of come back, I see your question about my qualifications. I am a depth psychologist. That's correct. You heard that accurately. It's a little bit, I would say, of a fringe part of the world of psychology, but essentially it is training in anything that acknowledges the unconscious. So if we think back to some of the early founders, think Carl Jung, think Freud, their sort of philosophical approach was that the underlying currents are really what are driving us. And if we can bring some of those underlying pieces up to the surface, become aware of them, then we can learn how to navigate. So that's kind of to answer your question. Perfect. Moving forward, I guess along this very same vein, the first thing that I want to speak to is just a couple of misconceptions that seem really common about emotional intelligence. The first one being that we can in fact control our emotions. Kind of going along with the same current metaphor, I like to view our emotions more like the waves crashing on the beach. We really can't control the tides, and we really can't control how big those waves are going to be. We can't control how frequently they're going to come. Really, what emotional intelligence is trying to achieve is being able to surf, right? We have to learn to surf. Just like we have to learn to identify the currents that are underneath the surface of the water in the ocean so that we can accurately get to where we want to go, we have to learn to surf to be able to survive the waves that crash on the shore and not get pulled under in the undertow. The second misconception that I find oftentimes pops up is that emotional intelligence is innate, right? Like we're born with that. And in some ways that's true. Just like all of us are predisposed to have strengths in different ways, we all may have different capacities sort of at the outset, what we're born with, to be more or less emotionally intelligent, if you will. That's not to say that we can't learn. So it's sort of the nature-nurture debate. But the nurture piece is really, really huge. We can foster the ability, just like we can foster the ability to learn to be a better speaker or a better presenter. We can learn to be better athletically. We can go to the gym. We can learn to do things better as long as we practice. And that is a really big part of emotional intelligence, is the practice piece. The third kind of misconception that I feel like is also really important to debunk at this point is just that emotional intelligence is all about learning how to be empathic to other people, right? Like learning how to read other people's emotions or be compassionate. And fundamentally, emotional intelligence actually starts with self-awareness. It's pretty hard to be empathic towards someone else if we don't have an understanding of our own emotional world. So I really want to just highlight that other kind of misconception that it's about anyone else when it starts with us. Having said all of that, I guess I want to kind of next, well, maybe I should ask if there's any questions on that, but I don't see any popping up, so we probably can keep moving. From those misconceptions, I guess I really also want to highlight the relationship between emotional intelligence and emotional resilience. So this workshop or this presentation is really about emotional resilience, and we're talking a lot about emotional intelligence so far. The thing is that the two go really hand in hand. The argument that Daniel Goleman, who's one of the kind of founders in terms of emotional intelligence, would say is that emotional resilience cannot be kind of fostered or created without emotional intelligence happening first. So we have to really understand what it is that's going on in order to then be able to become more resilient, or resilient really at all. So that's kind of really why we're commingling these two terms. The framework or tools that feel like they're important, I want to talk a little bit about. There's 3 that we're going to go through. The first one is really just that. So the idea or the catchphrase is name it to tame it. And what that means is that we have to be able to label or identify what it is that's going on for us in our own emotional worlds in order to then be able to respond to it. And I use the word respond really intentionally, not to react to it, but to respond to it. If we don't know that we're angry, there's no way that we will understand or know how to then act or behave or respond to that anger. So really identifying the emotions is sort of first and foremost what I would do with my work in counseling and what I think is really important in building emotional resilience. Those sort of cheesy little smiley face charts are really useful in this regard, to be able to have a language that helps sort of break down all of the tiny sort of little minutia that are in the emotional world. Is it irritated or is it frustrated? Is it angry or is it sad? Being able to distinguish those is pretty crucial. So that's kind of our first really big tool to building emotional resilience. The second is going to be a little bit counterintuitive. So I think when we think about emotional resilience, we think, well, just if we don't feel angry or if we don't feel any of the negative emotions, whether that's sadness or frustration, rage, any of that, if we just don't feel it, then we're resilient. But unfortunately, that's not the way to go. Pretty backwards, actually, because all that is resistance. So really the second tool or framework is that the only way out is through. Similar to the waves crashing on the beach, right? That we can't stop those. We have to learn to surf them. So we can't get rid of the negative emotions. We can't sort of surgically remove them from the nursing side of things, right? Like we cannot medically remove those, but we can learn to navigate them. The way to navigate them is through tolerance and acceptance of the fact that they're even there in the first place. So there's sort of a two-tiered approach to this, which is the tolerance or acceptance being the foundation part of that. And once we've identified it, we have to say, all right, I'm feeling anxious today, or I'm feeling super sad today, and that is okay. We can tolerate being in the space where we feel whatever that emotion might be. And even for some people, and I know Brene Brown argues that joy is the hardest feeling actually, or emotion to tolerate, which again might seem a little bit backwards, but in some ways I think is really true, that whatever the emotion is that we struggle with, we have to begin to learn to tolerate it. So once we've kind of done that, being okay with the uncomfortable piece and gain some acceptance, then we go to the next kind of level of that, which is the response. So how do we then respond to whatever the emotional aspect is that we're feeling, whether that is negative or positive? And I want to talk about 4 different, pretty specific tools in terms of how to move from a place of like, okay, this is what I'm feeling, I know what it is, and I can tolerate it for, a period of time. I'm not saying we have to tolerate it indefinitely, but for a period of time. Then we can move to a couple different skills-based things. The first one is called Halt, which literally means stop. And it's an acronym for hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. we want to halt when we kind of are noticing these negative emotions and check in on these sort of more basic needs kinds of things, right? So am I hungry? Have I eaten today? Have I given my body the nutrition it needs to be able to really work? Have I given my brain the nutrition it needs to be able to function properly? Angry, am I angry about something? And this is pretty common, when people are feeling really overwhelmed, when the smackdown of life gets put on us in some way, shape, or form, people are really angry usually. We know that anger is a secondary emotion, so what's under that is often sadness, but to be able to identify what it is we're angry about is pretty important. Are we lonely? Can we reach out to a friend or a loved one, someone who's supportive, and be able to make a connection with that? Are we feeling kind of isolated? And we want to address that if we are. And tired. And it's a big one these days, right? Everybody's, how are you doing? Well, I'm busy. Everybody's overworked and has a lot on their plate. So we want to make sure that we're getting the rest that we need. If we can check in on those 4 pieces and address them, have a snack, take a nap, sometimes that emotional storm will pass pretty quickly. That's sort of skill 1. Skill 2 is what I would call zoom out, or go to the 30,000 foot view. So when we're up in our airplane and we're flying across the country, it looks pretty different than when we're standing down here on the surface of the earth. Can we zoom out and see the bigger picture and be able to kind of maybe notice that things are a little bit smaller than they might feel like they are in the moment? That can be super useful. The third one is called the worry box, and this can be done as simply or as elaborately as you want to do it, but usually people have some sort of a box, a shoebox or something in their house somewhere that you can take, and it's helpful to have it be an actual physical representation. And then you write whatever the worries, anxieties, and emotions are down, and we put them into the worry box. Sometimes I encourage people to decorate that and, make it really personal and invest some time into making a space for our anxieties or our worries or our fears to go. And then once it's in the box, it's as if we put a concrete lid on it and those things are sort of there and stored. We've acknowledged them. We're not ignoring them, but they have a safe space, and then they're not kind of running through our head in that racing thought fashion. The 4th and final thing, I think, in terms of skill for our sort of mini version here, a Cliff Note version of emotional resilience, is putting yourself into the future. So in 5 years from now, whatever it is that's happening to you, is it going to matter? Is it going to be important? If you can put yourself into that space, it can be really eye-opening and a matter of like, oh, wow, yeah, maybe this isn't quite as big as it feels in this very moment. And that in and of itself can be a really useful skill in times where things are feeling super overwhelming and just unmanageable. So I think those are my skills that I wanted to talk about.
Okay. So just to briefly cover, 2 weeks ago, I dislocated my thumb, and I realized that I went through a bunch of emotions with this, and when I did it, I thought it was really funny, haha, it'll be fine. And then as you get to the doctor, you go see him, they're like, yeah, you have to wear this thing for however long, and you can't ride your bike, which is my sanity sessions. So then the anger and the rage, so taking that something away brought a lot of anger and rage in my life, which I hadn't seen in a long time because I had been reducing it with being in the outdoors, bike riding, and that, like I said, that is what typically gets rid of the crazies, as I call it. And so it helps me to ground. And so for you guys, it's, and then actually through the anger, I started to had grounding myself and then dealing with the frustration. And now it's just acceptance. And it's a lot like a grieving process, only in hyperspeed, I think, if you were to lose like a limb or a loved one or something, I think. But, that recreation and how important it plays a part in, again, navigating your mind and helping it to stay healthy is, you know, I had to adapt and find different ways to recreate. This is not my dominant hand. So that's helpful. I can drive and I can still walk. And that is a huge factor because I think the same day or a day after, a friend of mine broke his femur. So he's out. And so when you think about it in context of that, you know, it's a really minor injury. And so learning how to find those things that can still make you happy. So being on the trail is what makes me happy, and I can still get there. It's just I have to go via my feet, and that's it. And so I have to deal with that until I can get back on my bike. But that's kind of how I would use recreation therapy to help bring back some of that positive emotion back into somebody's life, and to figure out how to use nature to be mindful and to think about things. When I was younger, before I really got into biking, used to stomp up a mountain in Alaska, and I used to just run and stomp and yell and scream by myself. And that's kind of how I got rid of the crazies. And so now I like to teach people how to do that in a nice, safe way. So, any questions at this point?
Looks like, yes, we are recording.
Yes. We will, to my 86-year-old mom. I love that.
That's great. Good information for everybody to learn. It's good life information.
Yeah. So we have a few more minutes. Rebecka, do you want to kind of summarize?
Sure. Yeah. I think, you know, for me, a couple of the things that you just said in terms of what you're sharing about your personal experience is that the mindfulness aspect is really important. And that ties into the things that I've already said, but just in a different way. Mindfulness has become a pretty big part of the world of psychology in the last number of years, maybe decade or more. And I think that, you know, when the research is showing, when we're able to spend a few minutes, even a day, just noticing our breathing, just being still and being quiet, then that really increases our ability to ride the wave and surf, to be able to tolerate whatever it is that's coming down the pike at us, whether it's that smackdown of life or, you know, this injury that might happen to you. Being able to practice that mindfulness, it's the practice thing, is pretty crucial. I think, you know, the other aspect that I would just really highlight is where the wilderness part or nature part comes into that. When, you know, depending, I don't know what you guys in terms of your levels of being outdoors is, but I know for me as well as Di, it's a pretty important area of life, right? Like connecting with nature. It helps foster that mindfulness, being aware of where we are on the trail, being aware of our surroundings, being aware of the terrain, being aware of the weather, making sure that we're, you know, being safe, being aware of the wildlife, especially here in Bozeman, not, you know, running across the bears on the trails if we can. And when we do, you know, knowing how to then be able to stay calm enough to respond to that in a way that's going to keep us alive. And that's pretty important. But that's where, you know, I think some of the pieces that you are bringing to the table in terms of recreation therapy and this wilderness aspect is really important to complement, if at best, if not, you know, really become another way of providing therapy for people to be able to increase those aspects of mindfulness in a moment-to-moment kind of capacity. It's something very different about sitting in an office setting, as I've traditionally done in my practice, and having someone kind of talk through their emotions. It's very different than when somebody's out on the trail and trying to learn how their own emotional world is responding to the world around them. So it is just a really remarkable way of helping people heal.
Yeah, and I've seen, and you may have seen this, Rebecka and I have worked in the past together with veteran programs, and the amazing thing about working in the outdoors is that you get out of those four walls, and it inherently allows this freedom or the sense of freedom, and people tend to open up quicker, I think, than they would maybe in a four-wall setting. And that may or may not be the truth for everybody, but I feel like somehow being outside, it just lets your guard down in a way that you feel like it's okay to open up and it's okay to be vulnerable. And a nice tool that just is, I led a hiking therapy program, and we did this awesome thing where, and you can do this on your own time, is that we picked up rocks along the way, and each rock represented an issue or, something we were trying to work on. And then when we got to the top, we threw those out, and it's like the worry box. It's like we just throw them out, let it go, and then come back down and just feel like that weight is lifted off of there. And so don't carry that baggage around. But anything else? Any other questions? I think this is going to conclude our session. We do have a couple things going on that I'll talk about just to make sure we don't have any questions.
Cool. So nature and exercise help you stay resilient. I think that's exactly
Yes.
really what we want to highlight here. And I think the connection between what is it that those pieces, the exercise and the nature, is really doing for us from more a traditional, maybe clinical approach, which hopefully you can really see the translation of those pieces crossing over. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Gardening, awesome. Yeah. And yoga really is the same thing, right? It's the noticing and being mindful. It's the paying attention to the breath, really connecting with the body. We have, I think traditionally we come from a kind of dichotomous mind-body split approach in our culture. And yoga, I think, is one of the great ways to move away from that, move past that, to a holistic kind of idea of who we are and what healing really means, body and soul. Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Sure. I'll unmute you guys. Sorry. Thank you. Go ahead.
Unless the other participant, I think I see her name is Jessica, I'm not sure, has something to say first.
Go ahead.
So,
Things to say right now.
Okay. The reason I wrote that, yes, I agree, nature and exercise, absolutely, and I love Jessica's recommendation, yoga, gardening. I would say, I think you're implicitly suggesting meditation or meditative type practices. So the reason I'm focused there is because unfortunately, like people with a dislocated thumb, can't always do things. And like, I'll just say my 86-year-old mom can't do any of those things, unfortunately. So the things the tools that Rebecka was specifically speaking about are available to everybody.
Yes.
Like those particular 4 techniques. So that's what I'm especially interested in. Not to say that recreation, nature, yoga, gardening aren't probably some of the very best ways to do it, but they're not accessible to everybody. So I'm kind of actually I'm going to throw this question out there to you, because this is what I love to think about. I mean, I like to think about thinking. I like to think about psychology. And it's why I do what I do professionally, and why I'm gratified in my work. But I've, among other things, this week, these last 2 weeks, I have needed to pull together my greatest resilience producing factors. And I haven't been able to do any of the things. Oh, it's going to have a time limit.
Yeah, we're going to cut down in about 5 minutes.
Oh, no longer. Okay. So I'll just get to the point. I'm going to, myself, I've been saying this for a long time. I've been caring for my 86-year-old mom. It's just gotten serious. So I'm the one that needs to be emotionally resilient now. In general, I'm trying to teach her how to be emotionally resilient, because that's part of what's going on with her. But I've also already decided that I'm going to try to start a support group for other caregivers.
That's nice.
I've said that for 3 years, but just haven't pulled it off yet. So I'm going to start that. But actually, what's more interesting to me is the opportunity, the possibility of actually having a discussion group with other people that are interested in these matters, like you two and like Jessica. If anybody is interested, if any of you three are interested in, I'd even do like a research group. Like, we could just read and bring stuff, Jung, Freud, whoever. I think of Carl Rogers as a super relevant person.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so anyway, if you're interested in doing that, I just want to tell you, and I'll say to Jessica, who doesn't know me, please contact me. I can try to type in my info. If you're at all interested in either one of those things. The support group would be for caregivers. I saw Jessica say something about her grandma. And the discussion group would just be for others. I'm also interested in finding a discussion group with dietitians and nutritionists, or creating one, because that's a very important interest of mine also. And I think it's relevant to resilience even. So tell me if I should type my stuff in so that you can contact me if you want to.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, put it out there, and I would think, Jessica, you can take that if you'd like.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna not be seen while I do that.
We have a couple minutes, and then we're gonna get shut down. So, do you have anything you want to add or ask?
Well, I can see myself using this in the classroom with the students, because as far as I know, every year I get moved to another grade level, and this time I will be doing special education.
Oh, wow.
And they already have told me that I will be with a student that has those issues where out of nowhere she has an episode, and they don't know how to control her in the classroom. So I have to learn some techniques and apply with her when those moments that she'll have. And then I have to do a BIP, like a behavior intervention plan. And I want to prepare already, so by the beginning of the school year, I don't have any problems like that. I can already foresee. I can already have it planned what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah.
Well, prevention is, we know, one of the best keys. So you are right on the money there. Good for you for doing that.
Yeah, and thank you for all that information you provided.
Of course.
All right. Thanks you guys for attending.
Yeah, thank you both very much.
We have, if you're local, I have a wildflower therapy going on next week, and a creative quest. That's Tuesday night. A wildflower therapy is Monday night. And then I have Wild Women in the Wilderness. Jessica, I'm not sure where you're from, but if you're local, and or if you just want to come, that is in July 15th. Or I'm sorry, 12th through the 14th. And so
we have your info, Eric. Thanks.
Yeah. And so we also have a $50 off coupon for that retreat is using the code WildWoman when you go to, and that's all on my website at youradventurerx.com. And then if you want any kind of swag or anything else, any other signups, you can get 15% off of any product using Adventure, the code Adventure at youradventurerx.com.
And then I guess we are working on potentially another similar kind of conversation, with just a little bit deeper dive into some of these aspects. So stay tuned for that as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
How do I guess, Rebecka, do you have your own website? Do you have your own?
I do have a website and a practice. It's YellowstoneWellness.com. And
Okay.
take a look at that. It's pretty simplistic, and I fly under the radar a little bit.
Okay.
You're more than welcome.
But these, and Diana, the things that you talked about, those experiences, are they on your website in terms of the dates and times?
Yeah, it has all the information on there. It's just too much to put here. So if you go under experiences, you'll find all that information, and services. There's a services and experiences page. So.
And like emails to contact either one of you, or?
Yeah,
on the website.
I'll, if you don't mind, I'll put you on my email list, Eric, and I'll keep you abreast of what we got going on.
Please, thanks. How did Jessica hear about it from Texas?
Well, I think I receive information on there on I think I signed up for the wilderness one. I didn't sign up for the, but something about Adventure RX, something like that, and that sounded interesting because I do want to travel at the same time, get a something out of it. I guess I'll see new places, but I also want to like I like the like the psychology about it included.
Well, thank you both so
Yeah,
much.
thank you both so much. We're gonna get shut down here in a second, so
Yeah.
we'll see you next time.
If Jessica can post her email or something, I'd love to touch base with her too. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thank you.